Okay guys, so today this video is going to look at the poem Sport by Paul Durcan. Before we look at the poem in detail, we just want to think about this idea of what sport represents. Why has he chosen the title Sport? So the poem itself is looking at Durcan's relationship with his father. And what would we expect if we look at what's represented in the media, we look at stereotypical images of father-son relationships, we want to think about what is the function of sport in that relationship. What does it offer to fathers and sons? Okay, come back down in a second. So what we're looking at doing today is again just reading and understanding the poem and analysing the language of the poem. We need to also have good contextual understanding of Durcan's life, which we'll go through as we examine the poem. Okay, so the poem Sport, when we look at the idea of a father-son relationship, usually we don't see discussion and deep conversation being a typical aspect of father-son relationships. However, sport is a way of bridging that gap. Okay, sport is a bonding exercise usually in the idea of father-son relationships, and it's there and it allows father and sons to have conversations during sport and allows them to develop a deeper bond. Okay, and that's what we would expect from a poem that called Sport as looking at a father-son relationship. However, with Durcan, there's something else going on. It's a bit more complex, his relationship with his father. Okay, so we'll look at the poem itself to start off with. Sport. There were not many fields in which you had hopes for me, but sport was one of them. On my 21st birthday, I was selected to play for Grange Gorman Mental Hospital in an away game against Mullingar Mental Hospital. I was a patient in B Wing. He drove all the way down 50 miles to Mullingar to stand on the sidelines and observe me. I was fearful I would let down not only my team but you. It was Gaelic football. I was selected as goalkeeper. There were big country men on the Mullingar Mental Hospital team. Men with gapped teeth, red faces, oily, frizzy hair, bushy eyebrows. Their full forward line were over 6 foot tall, 15 stone in weight. All three of them, I was informed, cases of schizophrenia. There was a rumour that their centre half forward was an alcoholic solicitor who, in a lounge bar misunderstanding, had castrated his best friend, but that he had no memory of it. He had meant well, it was said. His friend had to emigrate to Nigeria. To my surprise, I did not flinch in the goals. I made 3 or 4 spectacular saves, diving full stretch to turn a certain goal around the corner, leaping high to tip another certain goal over the bar for a point. It was my knowing that you were standing on the sideline that gave me the necessary motivation, that will to die, that is as essential to sportsmen as to artists. More than anybody, it was you I wanted to mesmerise. And after the game, Grange Gorman Mental Hospital, having defeated Mullingar Mental Hospital by 14 goals and 38 points to 3 goals and 10 points, sniffing your approval, you shook hands with me. Well played, son. I may not have been mesmeric, but I had not been mediocre. In your eyes, I had achieved something at last. On my 21st birthday, I had played on a winning team, the Grange Gorman Mental Hospital team. Seldom, if ever again, in your eyes, was I to rise to these heights. Okay, so first impressions, we want to think about how would you describe the relationship between the father and the son in this poem? Where is the poet living during this time? And does the poet appreciate that his father's support of him? What makes you think this? Okay, so I'm going to go back to the poem there and show it to you again. Suggest pausing the video now for a few minutes. Read through the poem 2 or 3 times again yourself. In order to really be able to analyse the poems, you need to have an excellent familiarity with them. Okay, so read through it again, make sure you're clear on the plot and what's going on in the poem at the moment. Okay, now before we move into a deeper analysis of the poem, what we need to look at is what's going on in Durcan's life at the moment. Okay, so our initial questions were, how would you describe the relationship between the father and son? Now sometimes people do think that there's hints of a positivity in the relationship because the father has driven 50 miles in order to observe his son, in order to be at the match. Okay, however, we do need to look at the language being used. Okay, how is Durcan describing his relationship with his father? So we're going to look into the first stanza. We're going to look at this line, observe me. Okay, observe me is very much perhaps a strange term to use when you're at the sideline of a match. Okay, why observe? Why not something else? Why not support? The first and final lines. Okay, so we look at the first lines. There were not many fields in which you had hope for me. Okay, and then if we look down at the end, seldom, if ever again, your eyes will I rise to these heights. There's definitely something askew in this relationship. Okay, there's definitely a bit of tension going on here. You know, the poet does not see his father as viewing him as being worthy of support. He definitely thinks that his father does not promote him or see him as being a success. Okay, we go on. The poet, we'll see he is living in Grange Gorman Mental Hospital. So just giving us a bit more of a clue as to what's going on and why the relationship might be turbulent. Okay, and do you think he appreciates his father's support of him? And usually, when we look at this poem, by the time we get to the end of it, we will consider that perhaps he enjoys the fact that his father is there and he's able to impress his father for once. But there's definitely a tone of unhappiness, or not being, or seeing through this moment, and seeing this moment as not being enough. Okay, so in context, what we need to understand of what's going on here is that this is based on Durcan's life. And what happened was, as a young man, Durcan made some decisions that his family did not particularly agree with. Decisions about what he would study in college. There was issues around his health. So as a young man, he was diagnosed with a bone disease, I believe. You can double check that now. That basically stopped. He was a promising young sportsman as a young teenager. This disease that he got meant he could no longer practice sport. So sport went from being a huge part of his life, still was a huge part of his life, he still bases around it, but his hopes to be a professional sportsman were kind of destroyed by this disease. When he went on then, he decided he wanted to study literature in college. His family didn't agree with this, and essentially his family had him committed to a mental hospital because they disagreed with his decisions. They believed that he was not in his right mind. Now, Durcan has said that Durcan is of the belief that this was completely wrong, that he was perfectly within his right mind. He repeatedly says it. He points out that later in his life he does suffer from issues around depression. However, he places this on the treatment that he got in the mental hospital as being a cause of this depression rather than a solution. And we know that he was subjected to electroshock treatment. It was a very, very extreme and painful treatment during his time in the mental hospital he was put into. And this obviously is going to have had a huge effect on his relationship with his father. He already had an estranged relationship with his father. They weren't maybe not estranged, but definitely had a difficult relationship with his father. And having him committed to the mental hospital was an incredibly harsh action to take. And Durcan is it's definitely become a part of Durcan's relationship and how he discusses things about his father. Okay? So at the time that this poem, what the poem is based on, is a time when his father had committed to a mental hospital. His father had him placed into a mental hospital, and now he is discussing his father coming to visit him. Okay, and that he is trying to impress his father, even though his father has done this. But he, this very harsh action against him, he still wants to impress his father, but he feels like he can never impress his father, and that why would this little action of being on a football team be something that would impress him? Why is that something that he needs to do to impress his father? There's definitely derision about his a bit of derision there about how his view of what his father places importance on. Okay? So we have to keep that context in mind as we read through this poem. We need to be aware of that. So we're going to go through the poem break it down into a few different sections. So we're going to look at stanza 1 and 2 together. So, there were not many fields in which you had hopes for me, but sport was one of them. On my 21st birthday I was selected to play for Grange Gorman Mental Hospital in an away game against Mullingar Mental Hospital. I was a patient in B-Wing. We drove all the way down 50 miles to Mullingar to stand on the sidelines and observe me. I was fearful I would let down not only my team but you. It was Gaelic football. I was selected as goalkeeper. There were big country men on the Mullingar Mental Hospital team. Men with gapped teeth, red faces, oily, frizzy hair, bushy eyebrows. Their full forward line were over 6 foot tall, 15 stone in weight. all three of them, I was informed, cases of schizophrenia. So, what impression are we given of the poet's relationship with his father in the first 3 lines? Okay, now we've already talked about this use of the word observe. Okay, that's at the end of the stanza. In the first 3 lines, we look at, he says, there was not many places where you had hopes for me. That's setting up that the father does not have high expectations of his son. Definitely going to be, we expect our parents to, most of us, we want our parents to have high aspirations for us. Durcan's father does not have those. What is strange about the way the father's acting, that brings us down to that observing. He's not there to support, he's there to judge. He's observing his son, he's seeing, is his son good enough? Okay. How does the poet highlight the absurdity in the situation? And we can look at the use of repetition here. He keeps referring to the mental hospitals by their full names. Grange Gorman Mental Hospital, Mullingar Mental Hospital. Usually when we're familiar with institutions like this, whether it be schools or whether it be hospitals or any kind of big institution, we shorten the name. We don't call it by its full name, Grange Gorman Mental Hospital. We would shorten it maybe just to Grange Gorman, or I don't know what they shorten Grange Gorman Mental Hospital to, but it would definitely be a shortened version that people will colloquially use when referring to it. The fact that he keeps using the full name Grange Gorman Mental Hospital, Mullingar Mental Hospital, he is drawing our attention to this fact that he is in a mental hospital. This is a huge issue throughout the poem and throughout his life, of course. There's also this idea of the opposition, that he is a 21-year-old young man, it's his birthday, and he is up against these huge men, much bigger than him, and who are quite dangerous. They're cases of schizophrenia. We're going to learn in the next stanza about what one of them has done. And this is not a normal situation. This is not a normal way to be spending your 21st birthday. So that use of the birthday is very much highlighting the absurdity of what's going on. And at what point do we get a sense he's being desperate to impress his father? And I would say that probably comes across then down in the start of the second stanza when he says, I was fearful I would let you down. He's desperate to try and impress his father, desperate to do anything to impress his father. So a few different things going on. So notes, the first line introduces the idea of a difficult relationship. The father never expected much of his son. First few lines there, father didn't expect much. It's not what we usually expect to hear when we're discussing parents' views of their children. The idea that he might actually do something for his father's approval here is undercut by this idea that he's playing for a mental hospital. It's absurd, it's strange. Why would, surely the bigger issue here is not football matches, the fact that his son is in a mental hospital, but it seems like the big issue for the father is that he is playing in a football match. And there's an implication there that he has to be restrained and confined in order to be acceptable. Then knowing that Durcan moved down, covered this 50 miles. This is put into a very short line and maybe possibly stand out. It's got commas on each side, causes us to pause, brings our attention to these lines. And what we would say is most people would read is there's a bit of resentment and possible sarcasm in those lines. Oh, you drove 50 miles. You had me admitted to a mental hospital, but well done, you drove 50 miles to see my football match. There's a false praise there, possibly. Towards his father's feeble efforts. This isn't enough to make me forgive you for what you've done to me. And then, as I've already pointed out a few times, this word observe, notice he's there to judge rather than support his son. He's there to check, is the son good enough now for his approval, or is rather than just being there to unconditionally love and support his son. Now we move on to the next one. Durcan feels pressure to make his father proud. And this again, the absurdity is reiterated by the fact he's playing for a mental hospital, which, as I've said, full name being constantly repeated, shows how strange that is. And then this imagery of these other men. There's quite a bit of time put into this imagery here. We have 6 or 7 lines there going into describing these men. Their gap teeth, their red faces, their frizzy hair, 6 foot tall, 15 stone weight. He's trying to highlight the danger that these men could pop, and the difference between a 21-year-old young man against these much bigger men. Possibly, how strange the situation is and how difficult and how much danger he could be in this situation, and how far he's willing to go to try and impress his father at this time. So Now, I know I'm going to move quite fast because this is one of the longer poems and don't want this video to be too long. So just really quickly, some questions you might want to think about. From the opening stanzas of the poem, how do you believe Durcan feels about his father coming to the match? Okay, so look at, don't just read between the lines. Okay, don't just focus on the words he's using, just more to the tone of the poem. What does the poet fear most in this poem? Okay, is it these giant men that he's afraid of, or is there something else he's afraid of? Is it that is he more afraid of letting down his father than he is of being in physical danger from these large schizophrenic men he is facing in a football match? And do you believe the description of the other players is comical, intimidating, or shocking? Okay, what's he doing here? Is he, pointing out the strangeness to make us relax, to make it seem comical and the absurdity of the situation? Is it supposed to show us how intimidated he was? Okay, or is it supposed to shock us into realizing how bad the situation he's in has become? Okay, now, going to keep moving forward. Okay, so stanzas 3 and 4. There was a rumour that their centre half forward was an alcoholic solicitor who, in a lounge bar misunderstanding, had castrated his best friend, but that he had no memory of it. He had meant well, it was said. His best friend had to emigrate to Nigeria. To my surprise, I did not flinch in the goals. I made 3 or 4 spectacular saves, diving full stretch to turn a certain goal around the corner, leaping high to tip another certain goal over the bar for a point. It was my knowing that you were standing on the sideline that gave me the necessary motivation, that will to die, that is as essential to sportsmen as to artists. More than anybody, it was you I wanted to mesmerise. And after the game, Grange Gorman Mental Hospital, having defeated Mullingar Mental Hospital by 14 goals and 38 points, 3 goals and 10 points, sniffing your approval, you shook hands with me. Well played, son. So, the poet's using very visceral imagery in the third stanza here when he talks about the man having been castrated. Why do you think he's including such a strange and strong image here? To my surprise, so what was the poet surprised about in the start of stanza 4? Why do you think the poet continues to use the full names? That's what we already talked about. And what was the effect of the final line of stanza 4 when he talks about that well played son? So, we might talk about this visceral imagery of castration. It's trying to highlight again the absurdity and the danger and the fact that he is in such an unusual and unacceptable place at his 21st birthday. He's not out celebrating with friends, he's not being a young man, he's been committed against his will to a mental hospital. He needs us to understand the depth of the betrayal of his family against him and putting him in this place and comparing him to a man who has castrated someone in a bar misunderstanding, that they are viewing his crimes, his decision making, as being that profoundly wrong that they were committed him to such a place. The surprise seems to be that he is surprised by his own, especially start stanza 3 or stanza 4, seems to be that he's surprised by his own success. Okay? And this links back to Durcan being quite self-deprecating throughout a lot of his poetry. Okay, we'll see that in Nessa, we'll see that in McDermott Dynasty to an extent. We see that throughout his poem and inside Girl with the Keys to Pierce's College. There's a lot of self-deprecation from Durcan in his poetry. Comes across here again. Okay, he's surprised by his own successes, and that could be a reflection on the raising of his parents of him, that he's lacked so much confidence. And, why, of course, he's going to lack confidence when he's been treated this way and being committed to the hospital. Why do you think the poet continues to full names? What we've already talked about, highlighting the absurdity, repetition, how strange it is where he is, and that well played son. Look at the tone here. Is this well played son? That's the level of commendation he's going to get from his father. Is that enough? Is the father going, giving his son what he deserves in that single line? Alright, so a few quick notes on this. So the third stanza, this is all about highlighting the strangeness of the situation he's in, right? This absurdity, the visceral imagery of the castration, okay? And the comparison that Durcan is being committed to the same place or a similar place in a mental hospital as a man who has done such a horrible crime. Okay? He's really trying to help us. Durcan's really trying to make us understand his view of what being done to him. How crazy it is too in his view. Right? He's surprised by his own bravery in the match. For the man living in constant fear in a mental hospital, perhaps this game is giving him a chance for self-worth. Okay, he's self-deprecating in that he wasn't expecting himself to do well, but perhaps this football match is giving him the power now to see himself as being something better than he might otherwise have viewed himself. The need for his father approval, that will to die, just showing how much he needs his father to approve of him. It's everything to him. There's a will to die just to impress his father. He'll do anything for it. Okay? And, but it could also reflect his inner turmoil at the time, what's going on, the difficult mental state he must be going through by what his family have done to him by committing him to the hospital. The term mesmerise insinuates he may be longing to make an emotional, long-lasting change in his father. He's not just trying to impress him, he's trying to mesmerise him, he's trying to have a real deep effect on the father. And then finally, that final line, once again, the absurdity of the moment is reflected by the father finally approving of something his son has done. So he's finally getting the approval of his father. But look at what he's had to do to get it. He's had to be committed to a mental hospital. And the father is ignoring that situation. Who cares if he's in a mental hospital, as long as he is able to win a football match? It's crazy, it's an insane situation. Alright, so thinking about that, do you think the imagery in the third stanza adds much to the poem, or is the poet going too far when describing the scene? Is it necessary for, or is it does it add to the poem to quiv in this visceral image of the castration of the friend? How would you describe the language used to describe how the poet does in the football match? And what kind of relationship exists between father and son during the game, i.e. the son wanting to impress father and father's well played son comment? There's a few things to think about before we move on. Okay, so just have again, come up with your own opinions on some of those questions. Final stanza then, stanza 5. I may not have been mesmeric, but I had not been mediocre. In your eyes I had achieved something at last. My 21st birthday I played on a winning team, the Grange Gorman Mental Hospital team. Seldom if ever again, in your eyes, was I to rise to these heights. So what does the poet suggest is the most important thing to his father? How would you describe the poet's tone when discussing his father? And how do you think the poet's relationship with his father was in the years following this game, and why do you think this? So, he's suggesting very clearly, he's telling us on the moment, suggesting is probably not enough, he's telling us that the most important thing to the father is that the son is successful in a field that he approves of. And one of the fields he approves of is sport. The son being successful in that field is incredibly important to the father. The tone when discussing his father, there's definite sarcasm here, definite anger coming across. Seldom if ever again your eyes will I to rise to these heights. This relationship has not been improved by the time that the poem has been written. Do you think the poet's relationship with his father wasn't followed in the years to follow? And that final line, or final two lines, seldom if ever again in your eyes will I to rise to these heights, tells us that there was definite difficulties. This is the best thing he ever did in his father's eyes, and he definitely presents his father's view of his life in that way. Alright, so only a few quick notes here at the end. So, though the poet was not spectacular, mesmeric in his performance, his father seems to have improved. There's a definite sense of resentment in that term. At last, at the end of the third line there, at last, finally I've done something that's good enough for me. There's a slight inner conflict in the poet's mind. He seems happy to have won the game, especially as it's his birthday, it's a success, good day, it's his birthday, he's won the match, of course he's going to be happy. However, it's overshadowed by the fact that he's in a mental hospital, and that's why the full name of the mental hospital is coming up again, the Grange Gorman Mental Hospital team. That underwrites all the successes is the failure of the fact that he's in this mental hospital. And he's undergoing torturous treatment, this electric shock treatment is insane painful. Likewise, the relationship with his father will always be overshadowed. Just like his success here has been overshadowed by the fact he's in the mental hospital, his relationship with his father is always going to be overshadowed by the fact that the father had him committed to the hospital. And then finally, those last lines are hugely sarcastic. Pope believes his father has never seen him as positively as he had on this day, and seems resentful that his father never appreciated anything he ever did. Sarcastic tone around these heights. These are the heights. This is the best thing I'm going to achieve. Winning a football match. They're the heights I can aspire to. He sees this event as he won a match. It's nothing. It's a minimal kind of event. It was a good day, but that's all it was. And and it's not as great as achievement, but his father sees it as being something much more worthy than anything else his son is done. Okay. So again, last few questions to think about. Throughout the poem, the poet is repeated as his 21st birthday, that he's a patient in Grange Common Mental Hospital. Why is he repeating all these things? Okay. And how does father-son relationship seem at the end of the poem? So a few questions you could think about in terms of analysing this poem further. Tragedy and comedy are closely connected in the poetry of Paul Durcan. From the two poems of Durcan's we've studied, or if you've whatever 20 poems you've studied yourselves, maybe 3 points to either agree or disagree with the statement. Reading parents followed by sport, what connections can you see in between those two poems? Okay? And then imagine if you were Durcan and your family had you committed to a mental hospital for electric shock treatment. How do you think you would react to your parents showing up to the hospital football match? Would you be happy to see them? Or would you be angry? Okay? Would you see it as an opportunity to reconcile? Or you could, go into, be a bit creative, write a short poem expressing those emotions.